She was so certain he was lying. In front of the entire class, a 10-year-old black boy was labeled a storyteller, a pretender someone, trying to seem important. His assignment was torn apart, his truth dismissed, his dignity stripped away. But what no one knew was who was already on his way to that school. Because in just moments, the person she doubted most would walk through that door wearing 4 stars that would silence an entire room. So the real question is, what happens when the truth finally walks in? Tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. Before the humiliation, before the word liar was thrown at him like a punishment, Malik's life looked simple from the outside. He was a quiet, thoughtful black boy who carried a sense of pride he didn't always show. His family lived in a modest apartment, nothing fancy, nothing loud, just a place filled with warmth, discipline, and love. The walls held small pieces of who he was becoming. School ribbons, drawings, and little reminders of a world he was trying to understand. Every morning felt the same. He packed his backpack, double-checked his homework, and stepped into a routine that never warned him how quickly things could change. To most people, Malik blended in like any other kid, polite, smart, and a little shy. But beneath that calm surface, he held a truth bigger than himself, a truth he had been taught to carry quietly for safety and privacy. A truth he wished just once he could share proudly without hesitation. At school, he tried to stay focused, moving through hallways where loud voices bounced around lockers and classrooms. Some kids talked about vacations, big houses, and parents with important titles. Malik listened quietly, knowing he had a story too. One he rarely shared, not because it wasn't real, but because it didn't fit what people expected from a boy who looked like him or lived where he lived. That morning felt no different. Students prepared for career day, teachers rushed through their routines, and the building buzzed with excitement. Yet something in the air felt heavier, as if the smallest decision could start a chain reaction no one saw coming. Malik didn't know it yet, but the quiet pride he carried was about to be tested in the harshest way. And the moment he put pencil to paper to write about his father, the countdown to everything began. Career day was supposed to be simple. A day where students celebrated the people who worked hard for them, guided them, and shaped their futures. But for Malik, it became the moment everything he'd carried quietly was dragged under a harsh spotlight. It all started when the teacher announced the assignment, 3 paragraphs about a parent's career. Other students wrote eagerly, their words flowing without hesitation, describing impressive titles and comfortable lifestyles. Malik, holding his pencil with a careful kind of pride, finally allowed himself to write the truth he had guarded for years. He kept his sentences neat. He kept his details respectful, and for the first time, he felt the weight of hiding lifted just a little. But that small moment of honesty didn't go unnoticed. The teacher walked past his desk, glanced at his paper, and paused long enough for discomfort to settle in his stomach. Her expression shifted, first confusion, then disbelief, then something sharper. Without a word, she stepped away, but Malik felt it. Something had already begun. The rest of the class continued writing, but Malik felt eyes lingering on him, whispers forming behind small hands. The room suddenly felt smaller, yet he stayed focused because he believed the truth should matter, especially today. But by the next morning, the energy had changed. Parents arrived in polished clothes. Students straightened their backpacks and adjusted their shirts. Career day had officially started, and Malik, seated quietly, waited for the moment he'd finally be allowed to be proud. But instead of pride, everything collapsed. As parents settled into the classroom, the teacher called Malik forward before anyone else. Her tone sharpened the air. She held his paper as if it carried an accusation rather than a truth. The words on those pages, the ones he had written with respect, were suddenly treated like a crime. The boy who had spent his whole life hearing about sacrifice, service, and honor was being reduced to someone desperate for attention. She insisted his story didn't make sense. She insisted kids from families like his didn't write about roles like that. And then, in front of students, parents, and strangers, she tore apart his work, piece by piece, until it fluttered to the floor like broken promises. The humiliation hit him like a cold wave. Tears blurred his vision, but he stayed upright. The room felt like it was watching a performance, waiting for him to break, waiting for him to admit that everything written on those pages was fantasy. But the truth didn't bend under pressure. It stayed silent inside him, refusing to disappear. The school administration got involved. The teacher insisted he was exaggerating. The vice principal questioned his honesty, and the roomful of adults carried an unspoken belief. A boy like Malik could not possibly be telling the truth. Every hallway he walked through felt longer. Every step toward the office felt heavier. Each minute stretched like an eternity, pulling him further into a storm he never asked for. Yet beneath the embarrassment and isolation, something fierce began to build inside him, a quiet strength, a determination not to shrink, even when every adult around him expected him to. And as the clock in the classroom crept closer to the hour his father was scheduled to arrive, the tension in the building grew thicker, like everyone was unknowingly waiting for the moment that would expose every wrong assumption made that day. Career Day was supposed to be simple, but now the truth was on its way, and it was wearing 4 stars. The classroom had never felt so tense. Parents whispered, students shifted nervously, and the teacher stood firm in her assumptions, convinced she had uncovered a child's lie. Malik sat alone beneath the weight of dozens of staring eyes, carrying a truth no one believed. Every breath felt tight, every second stretched painfully long. His dignity had been stripped in front of strangers, and yet he refused to lower his head. The clock ticked louder, counting down to the moment none of them were prepared for. Then, the hallway outside the classroom changed. The quiet murmur faded. Footsteps, heavy and steady, echoed with a purpose that pulled every gaze toward the door. Something powerful, something authoritative, moved closer, slow, deliberate, undeniable. When the doors finally opened, silence didn't just fall over the room, it crashed. Standing there, framed by the doorway, was a man in full military dress uniform, 4 gleaming stars on each shoulder, medals lined with precision, posture sharp enough to split the air. He carried the presence of someone used to commanding entire battalions, yet in that moment, he wasn't a general. He was a father searching for his child. Parents rose instinctively. Even those who worked with senators and judges straightened their backs in a reflexive show of respect. Children stared, wide-eyed, realizing the gravity of what they were witnessing. The teacher's face drained of color, her confidence evaporating in an instant. Every assumption she had made collapsed under the weight of the truth, now standing just a few feet away. And then the room shifted again, not because of rank or medals, but because of what happened next. The general's eyes found Malik sitting quietly at his desk, trying to stay strong despite the humiliation he just endured. The most powerful man in the building didn't address the adults, didn't offer explanations, didn't justify anything. Instead, he walked straight toward the little boy everyone doubted. The truth didn't need defending. It simply needed to be seen. And in that single moment, every lie spoken about Malik shattered because the proof had just walked through the door wearing 4 stars. In the stillness that followed, the classroom felt transformed. The presence of the 4-star general didn't just correct a mistake. It exposed the quiet, everyday harm that assumptions can inflict. Malik rose from his seat with a steadiness he didn't know he had. The moment his father placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, the weight he'd been carrying finally began to lift. Not because someone powerful walked in, but because the truth he held inside had finally been recognized. The teacher's certainty dissolved into regret. The parents who had looked away now understood the danger of believing stereotypes more than children. And the students who watched Malik be torn down earlier that morning now saw what real courage and dignity looked like in someone their own age. Career Day would end, but the memory of what happened would stay with every person in that room. The days that followed brought apologies, policy changes, and uncomfortable conversations. He learned that telling the truth sometimes requires standing alone until the world catches up. He learned that bias can hide behind experience, that racism doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through doubt, disbelief, and assumptions. And he learned that one moment of bravery can shift an entire system. But the story isn't just his, it's a mirror. A reminder of how quickly society doubts children who don't fit the picture they've imagined. A reminder of how often Black kids are forced to prove their innocence, their worth, their truth, before they're even old enough to understand why. So the question becomes, how many more children must carry truths that adults refuse to see? And, more importantly, will we listen the next time one of them speaks?